All right, kids, chapter 6. Here we go. Okay, so remember, they're just coming back from the front, right? Him and Kat just got food. They're feeling pretty good. Now we're going to see what happens next, okay? There are rumors of an offensive. We go up to the front 2 days earlier than usual. On the way, we pass a shelled schoolhouse. Stacked up against its longer side is a double wall of yellow, unpolished, brand-new coffins. They still smell of resin and pine in the forest. There are at least 100. That's a good preparation for the offensive, says Mueller, astonished. They're for us, growls Dettering. Don't talk rot, says Kat to him angrily. You'd be thankful if you get as much as a coffin, grins Tiaden. They'll slip you a waterproof sheet for your old Aunt Sally of a carcass. The others jest too, unpleasant jests, but what else can a man do? The coffins are really for us. The organization surpasses itself and that kind of thing. So they're marching up to the front now, right? And as they pass by this bomb schoolhouse, they see these coffins that are literally for whoever dies in this offensive. Ahead of us, everything is shimmering. The first night, we try to get our bearings. When it is fairly quiet, we can hear the transports behind the enemy lines rolling ceaselessly until dawn. Kat says that they do not go back, but are bringing up troops, munitions, and guns. The English artillery has been strengthened, that we can detect at once. There are at least 4 more batteries of 9-inch guns to the right of the farm. Behind the poplars, they have put in trench mortars. Besides these, they have brought up a number of those little French beasts with instantaneous fuses. We are now in low spirits. After we've been in the dugouts 2 hours, our own shells begin to fall in the trench. This is the 3rd time in 4 weeks. If it were simply a mistake in aim, no one would say anything. But the truth is that the barrels are worn out. The shots are often so uncertain that they land within their own lines. Tonight, 2 of our men were wounded by them. So looking over at the enemy, right, the English and the French, and they're realizing, oh my God, they have really good weapons. They're brand new weapons. They brought them up to the front. Whereas the Germans, right, their weapons are not great. They're actually falling apart. They're shooting into their own trenches by accident. They can't control their guns. So it's not really looking good for the Germans at this point. The front is a cage in which we must await fearfully whatever may happen. We lie under the network of arching shells and live in a suspense of uncertainty. Over us, chance hovers. If a shot comes, we can duck, that is all. We neither know nor can determine where it will fall. It is this chance that makes us indifferent. A few months ago, I was sitting in a dugout playing scat. After a while, I stood up and went to visit some friends in another dugout. On my return, nothing more was to be seen of the first one. It had been blown to pieces by a direct hit. I went back to the second and arrived just in time to lend a hand digging it out. In the interval, it had been buried. It is just as much a matter of chance that I am still alive as that I might have been hit. In a bomb-proof dugout, I may be smashed to atoms, and in the open may survive 10 hours bombardment, unscathed. No soldier outlives 1,000 chances, but every soldier believes in chance and trusts his luck. We must look out for our bread. The rats have become much more numerous lately because the trenches are no longer in good condition. Dettering says it is a sure sign of a coming bombardment. The rats here are particularly repulsive. They are so fat, the kind that we all call corpse rats. They have shocking, evil, naked faces, and it is nauseating to see their long, nude tails. They seem to be mighty hungry. Almost every man has had his bread gnawed. Kropp wrapped his in a waterproof sheet and put it under his head, but he could not sleep because they rolled over his face to get it. Dettering meant to outwit them. He fastened a thin wire to the roof and suspended his bread from it. During the night, when he switched on his pocket torch, he saw the wire swinging to and fro. On the bread was riding a fat rat. At last we put a stop to it. We could not afford to throw the bread away, because then we should have nothing left to eat in the morning, so we carefully cut off the bits of bread that the animals have gnawed. The slices we cut off are heaped together in the middle of the floor. Each man takes out his spade and lies down prepared to strike. Dettering, Kropp, and Kat hold their pocket torches ready. After a few minutes we hear the first shuffling and tugging. It grows. Now it is the sound of many little feet. Then the torches switch on, and every man strikes at the heat, which scatters with a rush. The result is good. We toss the bits of rat over the parapet and again lie in wait. Several times we repeat the process. At last the beasts get wise to it, or perhaps they have scented the blood. They return no more. Nevertheless, before morning, the remainder of the bread on the floor has been carried off. In the adjoining sector, they attacked 2 large cats and a dog, bit them to death, and devoured them. Okay, so now they're like in these trenches, right? They're falling apart, and now they can't really keep their bread because now they have these rats that come and eat them. These rats are disgusting. Next day, there was an issue with Edamame cheese. Each man gets almost a quarter of cheese. In one way, that is all to the good, for Edamame is tasty. But in another way, it is vile, because the fat red balls have long been a sign of a bad time coming. Our forebodings increase as rum is served out. We drink it, of course, but are not greatly comforted. During the day, we loaf about and make war on the rats. Ammunition and hand grenades become more plentiful. We overhaul the bayonets, that is to say, the ones that have a saw on the blunt edge. If the fellows over there catch a man with one of those, he's killed at sight. In the next sector, so when they keep saying sector, they mean trench. So in the next trench, some of our men were found whose noses were cut off and their eyes poked out with their own saw bayonets. Their mouths and noses were stuffed with sawdust so that they suffocated. Some of the recruits have bayonets of this sort. We take them away and give them the ordinary kind. But the bayonet has practically lost its importance. So bayonet is usually like, you have like a rifle or some sort of gun. At the end is this sword-type knife that you attach to the end of it and use it to stab people if they get closer to you. So that's what a bayonet is. But the bayonet has practically lost its importance. It is usually the fashion now to charge with bombs and spades only. The sharpened spade is more handy and a many-sided weapon. Not only can it be used for jamming a man under the chin, but it is much better for striking with because of its greater weight. If one hits between the neck and shoulder, it easily cleaves as far down as the chest. The bayonet frequently jams on the thrust, and then a man has to kick hard on the other fellow's belly to pull it out again. In the interval, he may easily get one himself. And what's more, the blade often gets broken off. So when they go to storm another trench, instead of taking the time to shoot the people that they're going to kill, they just stab them as they go over. At night, they send over gas. We expect the attack to follow and lie with our masks on, ready to tear them off as soon as the first shadow appears. Dawn approaches without anything happening. Only the everlasting, nerve-wracking roll behind the enemy lines. Trains, lorries. But where are they concentrating? Artillery fires on it continually, but it still does not cease. We have tired faces and avoid each other's eyes. We'll be like the Somme, says Cat gloomily. There we were shelled steadily for 7 days and nights. Cat has lost all his fun since we have been here, which is bad, for Cat is an old front hog and can smell what is coming. Only Teoden seems pleased with the good rations and the rum. He thinks we might even go back to rest without anything happening at all. The Somme was the bloodiest battle in World War I. Like in 7 days, there were hundreds of thousands of people wiped out. It almost looks like it. Day after day passes. At night, I squat in the listening post. Above me, the rockets and parachute lights shoot up and float down again. I am cautious and tense. My heart thumps. My eyes turn again and again to the luminous dial of my watch. The hands will not budge. Sleep hangs on my eyelids. I work my toes and my boots in order to keep awake. Nothing happens till I am relieved. Only the everlasting rolling over there. Gradually, we grow calmer and play scat and poker continually. Perhaps we will be lucky. All day, the sky is hung with observation balloons. There is a rumor that the enemy are going to put tanks over and use low-flying planes for the attack. But that interests us less than what we hear of the new flamethrowers. We wake up in the middle of the night. The earth booms. Heavy fire is falling on us. We crouch into the corners. We distinguish shells of every caliber. Each man lays hold of his things and looks again every minute to reassure himself that they are still there. The dugout heaves. The night roars and flashes. We look at each other in the momentary flashes of the light, and with pale faces and pressed lips, shake our heads. Every man is aware of the heavy shells tearing down the parapet, rooting up the embankment, and demolishing the upper layers of concrete. When a shell lands in the trench, we note how the hollow, furious blast is like a blow from the paw of a raging beast of prey. Already, by morning, a few of the recruits are green and vomiting. They are too inexperienced. Slowly the gray light trickles into the posts and pales the flashes of the shells. Morning has come. The explosion of mines mingles with the gunfire. That is the most dementing convulsion of all. The whole region where they go up becomes one grave. The reliefs go out, the observers stagger in, covered with dirt and trembling. One lies down in silence in the corner and eats. The other, an older man of the new draft, sobs. Twice he has been flung over the parapet by the blast of the explosion without getting any more than shell shock. The recruits are eyeing him. We must watch them. These things are catching. Already some lips begin to quiver. It is good that it is growing daylight. Perhaps the attack will come before noon. The bombardment does not diminish. It is falling in the rear, too. As far as one can see, spout fountains of mud and iron. A wide belt is being raked. The attack does not come, but the bombardment continues. We are gradually benumbed. Hardly a man speaks. We cannot make ourselves understood. Our trench is almost gone. At many places it is only 18 inches high. It is broken by holes and craters and mountains of earth. A shell lands square in the front of our post. At once it is dark. We are buried and must dig ourselves out. After an hour the entrance is clear again, and we are calmer because we have had something to do. A company commander scrambles in and reports that 2 dugouts are gone. The recruits calm themselves when they see him. He says that an attempt will be made to bring up food that evening. This sounds reassuring. No one had thought of it except Tiaden. Now the outside world seems to draw a little nearer. If food can be run up, think the recruits, then it really can't be that so bad. We do not disabuse them. We know that food is as important as ammunition, and only for that reason it must be brought up. So what's happening is they're getting a bombardment, so the enemy is bombing them, throwing everything they have at the Germans' trenches, and they're literally destroying the trenches. And these people are now tense. They're waiting for an attack. So when they do a bombardment, you throw everything you have at the enemy, then you rush over no man's land and go into their trench and try to kill them. So that's what they're waiting for, the Germans. They're like nervous. What's happening is the recruits are trying to get like a little emotional. And what happens when you see someone getting emotional and scared, it spreads like wildfire. So everyone gets emotional and scared. And they're nervous because when people get emotional and scared, they're not going to fight. They're going to take off and desert and run. And then that leaves everyone else, at a disadvantage. But it miscarries. A second party goes out, and it also turns back. Finally, Cat tries, and even he reappears without accomplishing anything. No one gets through. Not even the fly is small enough to get through such a barrage. We pull in our belts tighter and chew every mouthful 3 times as long. Still, the food does not last out. We are damnably hungry. I take out a scrap of bread, eat the white, and put the crust back in my knapsack. From time to time, I nibble at it. The night is unbearable. We cannot sleep, but stare ahead of us and doze. Tiaden regrets that we wasted the gnawed pieces of bread on the rats. We would gladly have them again to eat now. We are short of water too, but not seriously yet. Towards morning, while it is still dark, there is some excitement. Through the entrance rushes in a swarm of fleeing rats that try to storm the walls. Torches light up the confusion. Everyone yells and curses and slaughters. The madness and despair of many hours unloads itself in this outburst. Faces are distorted, arms strike out, and the beasts scream. We just stop in time to avoid attacking one another. The onslaught has exhausted us. We lie down and wait again. It is a marvel that our post has had no casualties so far, as one of the less deep dugouts. A corporal creeps in. He has a loaf of bread with him. 3 people have had the luck to get through during the night and bring some provisions. They say the bombardment extends undiminished as far as the artillery lines. It is a mystery where the enemy gets all his shells. We wait and wait. By midday, what I expected happens. One of the recruits has a fit. I've been watching him for a long time, grinding his teeth and opening and shutting his fists. These haunted, protruding eyes, we know them all too well. During the last few hours, he has had merely the appearance of calm. He had collapsed like a rotten tree. Now he stands up, stealthily creeps across the floor, hesitates a moment, then glides towards the door. I intercept him and say, "Where are you going?" "I'll be back in a minute," says he, and tries to push past me. "Wait a bit, the shelling will stop soon." He listens for a moment, and his eyes become clear. There again, he has the glowing eyes of a mad dog. He is silent, and he shoves me aside. "1 minute, lad," I say. Cat notices. Just as the recruit shakes me off, Cat jumps in and we hold him. Then he begins to rave. "Let me alone. Let me go out. I will go out." He won't listen to anything and hits out. His mouth is wet and pours out words, half-choked, meaningless words. It is a case of claustrophobia. He feels as though he is suffocating here and wants to get out at any price. If we let him go, he would run about everywhere regardless of cover. He is not the first. Though he raves and his eyes roll, it can't be helped. We have to give him a hiding to bring him to his senses. We do it quickly and mercilessly, and at last he sits down quietly. The others have turned pale. Let's hope it deters them. This bombardment is too much for the poor devils. They've been sent straight from a recruiting depot into a barrage that is enough to turn an old soldier's hair gray. After this affair, the sticky, close atmosphere works more than ever on our nerves. We sit as if in our graves, waiting only to be closed in. So that's an example of one of the recruits having shell shock. Suddenly it howls and flashes terrifically. The dugout cracks in all its joints under a direct hit. Fortunately, only a light one that the concrete blocks are able to withstand. It rings metallically, The walls reel. Rifles, helmets, earth, mud, and dust fly everywhere. Sulfur fumes pour in. If we were in one of those light dugouts that they had been building lately, instead of this deeper one, none of us would be alive. But the effect is bad enough even so. The recruits start to rave again, and 2 others follow suit. One jumps up and rushes out. We have trouble with the other 2. I start after one who escapes and wonder whether to shoot him in the leg, and it shrieks again. I fling myself down, and when I stand up, the wall of the trench is plastered with smoking splinters, lumps of flesh, and bits of uniform. I scramble back. The first recruit seems actually to have gone insane. He butts his head against the wall like a goat. We must try tonight to take him to the rear. Meanwhile, we bind him, but in such a way that in case of an attack, he can be released at once. Cat suggests a game of scat. It is easier when a man has something to do. But it is no use. Listen for every explosion that comes close, miscount the tricks, and fail to follow suit. We have to give it up. We sit as though in a boiler that is being belabored from without on all sides. Night again. We are deadened by the strain, a deadly tension that scrapes along one's spine like a gaped knife. Our legs refuse to move, our hands tremble, our bodies are a thin skin stretched painfully over repressed madness, over an almost irresistible bursting roar. We have neither flesh nor muscles any longer. We dare not look at one another for fear of some miscalculable thing. So we shut our teeth. It will end. It will end. Perhaps we will come through. Suddenly the nearer explosions cease. The shelling continues, but it is lifted and falls behind us. Our trench is free. We seize the hand grenades, pitch them out in front of the dugout, and jump after them. The bombardment has stopped, and a heavy barrage now falls behind us. Falls behind us. The attack has come. No one would believe that in this howling waste there could still be men, but steel helmets now appear on all sides of the trench, and 50 yards from us, a machine gun is already in position and barking. The wire entanglements are torn to pieces, yet they offer some obstacle. We see the stormtroops coming. Our artillery opens fire. Machine guns rattle, rifles crack. The charge works its way across. Hay and Crop begin with the hand grenades. They throw them as fast as they can. Others pass them, the handles of the strings already pulled. Hay throws 75 yards, Crop 60. It has been measured. The distance is important. The enemy, as they run, cannot do much before they are within 40 yards. We recognize the smooth, distorted faces, the helmets. They are French. They have already suffered heavily when they reach the remains of the barbed wire entanglements. A whole line has gone down before our machine guns. Then we have a lot of stoppages, and they come nearer. So machine guns, what happens with them back in these days, they have to be cooled with water. And if you don't do it enough, they stop and they jam the bullets, so they're not always super effective. And now the French are attacking. So the bombardment has stopped. The French soldiers are now coming across no man's land to the Germans' trenches and ready to kill them. I see one of the French soldiers, his face upturned, fall into a wire cradle. His body collapses. His hands remain suspended as though he were praying. Then his body drops clean away, and only his hands, with the stumps of his arms shut off, now hang in the wire. The moment we are about to retreat, 3 faces rise up from the ground in front of us. Under one of the helmets, a dark pointed beard and 2 eyes that are fastened on me. I raise my hand, but I cannot throw into those strange eyes. For one mad moment, the whole slaughter whirls like a circus around me, and these 2 eyes alone are motionless. When the head raises up, a movement, and my hand grenade flies through the air and into him. We make for the rear, so that now they're leaving their own trench and trying to go back to the furthest trench. Put wire cradles into the trench and leave bombs behind us with the strings pulled, which ensures us a fiery retreat. Machine guns are already firing from the next position. We have become wild beasts. We do not fight. We defend ourselves against annihilation. It is not against men that we fling our bombs. What do we know of men in this moment when death is hunting us down? Now, for the first time in 3 days, we can see his face. Now, for the first time in 3 days, we can oppose him. We feel a mad anger. No longer do we lie helpless, waiting on the scaffold. We can destroy and kill to save ourselves and to be revenged. We crouch behind every corner, behind every barrier of barbed wire, and hurl heaps of explosives at the feet of the advancing enemy before we run. The blast of the hand grenades impinges powerfully on our arms and legs. Crouching like cats, we run on, overwhelmed by this wave that bears us along, that fills us with ferocity, turns us into thugs, into murderers, into God only knows what devils. This wave that multiplies our strength with fear and madness and greed of life, seeking and fighting for nothing but our deliverance. If your own father came over with them, you would not hesitate to fling a bomb at him. The forward trenches have been abandoned. Are they still trenches? They are blown to pieces, annihilated. There are only broken bits of trenches, holes linked by cracks, nests of craters, that is all. But the enemy's casualties increase. They do not count on so much resistance. It is nearly noon. The sun blazes hotly. The sweat stings in our eyes. We wipe it off on our sleeves and often blood with it. At last we reach a trench that is in somewhat better condition. It is manned and ready for the counterattack. It receives us. Our guns open in full blast and cut off the enemy attack. The lines behind us stop. They can advance no farther. The attack is crushed by our artillery. We watch. The fire lifts 100 yards and we break forward. Beside me, a lance corporal has his head torn off. He runs a few steps more while the blood spouts from his neck like a fountain. It does not come quite to hand fighting. They are driven back. We arrive once again at a shattered trench and pass beyond it. Oh, this turning back again. We reach the shelter of the reserves and yearn to creep in and disappear. But instead we must turn around and plunge again into the horror. If we were not automata at that moment, we would continue lying there, exhausted and without will. But we are swept forward again, powerless, madly savage and raging. We will kill, for they are still our mortal enemies. Their rifles and bombs are aimed against us. If we don't destroy them, they will destroy us. So again, right, so they go to the back of the trenches, and they stop the enemy attack, and now they have to go forward, and now it's their turn to attack the enemy. So now they have to try to go over their yards of trenches, and then they go beyond their trenches to no man's land to now attack the French and the British soldiers. The brown earth, the torn, blasted earth, with the greasy shine into the sun's rays. The earth is the background of this restless, gloomy world of automatons. Our gasping is the scratching of a quill. Our lips are dry, our heads are debauched with stupor. Thus we stagger forward, and into our pierced and shattered souls bores the torturing image of the brown earth with the greasy sun and the convulsed and dead soldiers who lie there. It can't be helped, who cry and clutch at our legs as we spring away over them. We have lost all feeling for one another. We can hardly control ourselves when our glance lights on the form of some other man. We are insensible, dead men, who through some trick, some dreadful magic, are still able to run and kill. A young Frenchman lags behind. He is overtaken. He puts up his hands. In one he still holds his revolver. Does he mean to shoot or to give himself? A blow from his spade cleaves through his face. A second sees it and tries to run further. A bayonet jabs into his back. He leaps into the air, his arms thrown wide, his mouth wide open, yelling. He staggers. In his back the bayonet quivers. A third throws away his rifle, cowers down with his hands before his eyes. He is left behind with a few other prisoners to carry off the wounded. Suddenly in the pursuit we reach the enemy line. We are so close on the heels of our retreating enemies that we reach it at almost the same time as they. In this way we suffer a few casualties. A machine gun barks, but it is silenced with a bomb. Nevertheless, a couple of seconds has sufficed to give us 5 stomach wounds. With the butt of his rifle, Cat smashes to pulp the face of one of the unwounded machine gunners. We bayonet the others before they have time to get out their bombs. Then thirstily we drink the water that they have for cooling the gun. Everywhere wire cutters are snapping, planks are thrown across the entanglements. We jump through the narrow entrances into the trenches. Hayes strikes his spade into the neck of a gigantic Frenchman. There was a first hand grenade. We duck behind a breastwork for a few seconds, and the straight bit of trench ahead of us is empty. The next throw whizzes obliquely over the corner and clears a passage. As we run past, we toss handfuls down to the dugouts. The earth shudders, it crashes, smokes and groans. We stumble over slippery lumps of flesh, over yielding bodies. I fall into an open belly, on which lies a clean new officer's cap. The fight ceases. We lose touch with the enemy. We cannot stay here long, but must retire under the cover of our artillery to our own position. No sooner do we know this than we dive into the nearest dugouts, and with the utmost haste seize on whatever provisions we can see, especially the tins of corned beef and butter, before we clear out. We get back pretty well. There is no further attack by the enemy. We lie for an hour, panting and resting before anyone speaks. We are so completely played out that in spite of our great hunger, we do not think of the provisions. Then gradually we become something like men again. Right, so they do this crazy run to the French trenches, kill whoever they can, grab as many supplies as they can carry, and they run back to their own trenches. And that's the battle. That's the fight. And it's crazy, right? Because they become these like savage, wild animals in that moment. They lose all sense of themselves. They're just literally instinct to survive. And they have to somehow return to humanity again. And can they do it? The corned beef over there is famous along the whole front. Occasionally has been the chief reason for a flying raid on our part, for our nourishment is generally very bad. We have a constant hunger. We bagged 5 tins altogether. The fellows over there are well looked after. They fare magnificently, as against us, poor starving wretches, with their turnip jam. They can get all the meat they want. Hayes scored a thin loaf of white French bread and stuck it behind his belt like a spade. It's a bit bloody at one corner, but that can be cut off. It is a good thing we have something decent to eat at last. We still have a use for all our strength. Enough to eat is just as valuable as a good dugout. It can save our lives. That is the reason we are so greedy for it. Tiaden has captured two water bottles full of cognac. We pass them round. That evening benediction begins. Night comes out of the craters, rise the mists. It looks as though the holes were full of ghostly secrets. The white vapor creeps painfully around before it ventures to steal away over the edge. And long streaks stretch from crater to crater. It is chilly. I am on sentry and stare into the darkness. My strength is exhausted as always after an attack, and so it is hard for me to be alone with my thoughts. They are not properly thoughts. They are memories which in my weakness haunt me and strangely move me. The parachute lights soar upwards, and I see a picture. A summer evening. I'm in the cathedral cloister, and look at the tall rose trees that bloom in the middle of the little cloister garden where the monks lie buried. Around the walls are the stone carvings of the Stations of the Cross. No one is there. A great quietness rules in this blossoming quadrangle. The sun lies warm on the heavy gray stones. I place my hand upon them and feel the warmth. At the right-hand corner, the green cathedral spire ascends to the pale blue sky of the evening. Between the glowing columns of the cloister is the cool darkness that only churches have, and I stand there and wonder whether, when I'm 20, I shall have experienced the bewildering emotions of love. The image is alarmingly near. It touches me before it dissolves into the light of the next star shell. Remember, that's one of your questions, right? This memory that Paul has. It's not even necessarily memory, right? It is memory. It's not fully memory mixed with longing. What is the power of memories, and why is he picturing this church, right? So a cloister, like he's in this church. It's really peaceful. It's quiet. Why would he start picturing that during this crazy bombardment that's happening at the front? I lay hold of my rifle to see that it is in trim. The barrel is wet. I take it in my hands and rub off the moisture with my fingers. Between the meadows behind our town, there stands a line of old poplars by a stream, which are trees. So now he's going back into a memory, right? They were visible from a great distance, and although they grew on one bank only, we called them the Poplar Avenue. Even as children, we had great love for them. They drew us vaguely thither. We played truant the whole day by them and listened to their rustling. We sat beneath them on the bank of the stream and let our feet hang in the bright, swift waters. The pure fragrance of the water and the melody of the wind in the poplars held our fancies. We loved them dearly, and the image of those days still makes my heart pause in its beating. It is strange that all the memories that come have these two qualities. They are always completely calm. That is predominant in them. And even if they are not really calm, they become so. They are soundless apparitions that speak to me, with looks and gestures silently, without any word. It is the alarm of their silence that forces me to lay hold of my sleeve and my rifle, lest I should abandon myself to the liberation and allurement in which my body would dilate and gently pass away into the still forces that lie behind these things. They are quiet in this way because quietness is so unattainable for us now. At the front there is no quietness, and the curse of the front reaches so far that we never pass beyond it. Even in the remote depots and the rest areas, the droning and the muffled noise of shelling is always in our ears. We are never so far off that it is no more to be heard. But these last few days it has been unbearable. Their stillness is the reason why these memories of former times do not awaken desire so much as sorrow, a vast and inapprehensible melancholy. Once we had such desires, but they return not. They are past. They belong to another world that is gone from us. In the barracks they called forth a rebellious, wild craving for their return. For then they are still bound to us. We belong to them, and they to us, even though we were already absent from them. They appeared in the soldiers' songs, which we sang as we marched between the glow of the dawn and the black silhouettes of the forest to drill in the moor. They were a powerful remembrance that was in us and came from us. But here in the trenches they are completely lost to us. They arise no more. We are dead and they stand remote on the horizon. They are a mysterious reflection, an apparition that haunts us, that we fear and love without hope. They are strong, and our desire is strong. They are unattainable, and we know it. And even if these scenes of our youth were given back to us, we would hardly know what to do. The tender secret influence that passed from them into us cannot rise again. We might be amongst them and move in them. We might remember and love them and be stirred by the sight of them. It would be like gazing at the photograph of a dead comrade. Those are his features. It is his face. The days we spent together take on a mournful life in the memory. But the man himself, it is not. We can never regain the old intimacy with those scenes. It was not any recognition of their beauty and their significance that attracted us, but the communion, feeling of a comradeship with the things and events of our existence, which cut us off and made the world of our parents a thing incomprehensible to us. For then we surrendered ourselves to events and were lost in them, and the least little thing was enough to carry us down the stream of eternity. Perhaps it was only the privilege of our youth, but as yet we recognized no limits and saw nowhere an end. We had the thrill of expectation in the blood, which united us with the course of our days. Today we pass through the scenes of our youth like travelers. We are burnt up by hard facts. Like tradesmen, we understand the distinctions, and like butchers, necessities. We are no longer untroubled. We are indifferent. We might exist there. Should we really live there? We are forlorn like children, inexperienced like old men. We are crude and sorrowful and superficial. I believe we are lost. So it's this whole idea, like, what does it, like, he has these memories of his childhood, of his youth, that he really enjoys and loves, but he knows he'll never get that peace back, right? And because of that, how does that affect his future? If you have really good memories from when you were younger, but you're currently living in a really horrific and terrible situation, are you the same person as you were in your memories? What's different? How do you change? And because of that change, how does that affect the way you view your future? That doesn't make sense. Shoot me an email and we'll talk. My hands grow cold and my flesh creeps, yet the night is warm. Only the mist is cold, this mysterious mist that trails over the dead and sucks from them their last creeping life. By morning they will be pale and green, and their blood congealed and black. Still the parachute rockets shoot up and cast their pitiless light over the stony landscape, which is full of craters and frozen lights like a moon. The blood beneath my skin brings fear and restlessness into my thoughts. They become feeble and tremble. They want warmth and life. They cannot persist without solace, without illusion. They are disordered before the naked picture of despair. I hear the rattle of the mess tins and immediately feel a strong desire for warm food. It would do me good and comfort me. Painfully, I force myself to wait until I'm relieved. Then I go into the dugout and find a mug of barley. It is cooked and fat and tastes good. I eat it slowly. I remain quiet, though the others are in a better mood, for the shelling has died down. The days go by, and the incredible hours follow one another as a matter of course. Attacks alternate with counterattacks, and slowly the dead pile up in the field of craters between the trenches. So now the French and the Germans keep going back and forth attacking. And now the dead pile up in the craters. We are able to bring in most of the wounded that do not lie too far off, but many have long to wait, and we listen to them dying. For one of them, we searched 2 days in vain. He must be lying on his belly and unable to turn over. Otherwise, it is hard to understand why we cannot find him. For it is only when a man has his mouth close to the ground that it is impossible to gauge the direction of his cry. He must have been badly hit. One of those nasty wounds, neither so severe that they exhaust the body at once, and a man dreams on in a half-swoon, nor so light that a man endures the pain and hope of becoming well again. Cat thinks either has a broken pelvis or a shot through the spine. His chest could not have been injured, otherwise he would not have had such strength to cry out. If it were any other kind of wound, it would be possible to see him moving. He grows gradually hoarser. The voice is so strangely pitched that it seems to be everywhere. The first night some of our fellows go out 3 times to look for him, but when they think that they have located him and crawl across, the next time they hear the voice, it seems to come from somewhere else altogether. So there's this guy that's dying in no man's land. He keeps calling for help, and they keep sending out these rescue parties when the shelling dies down to go and try to find him, but they can't figure out where he is. Our company commander, we search in vain until dawn. We scrutinize the field all day with glasses, but discover nothing. On the second day, the calls are fainter. That will be because his lips and mouth have become dry. Our company commander has promised next turn of leave with 3 days extra to anyone who finds him. This is a powerful inducement, but we do all that is possible without that, for his cry is terrible. Cat and Crop even go out in the afternoon, and Albert gets the lobe of his ear shut off in consequence. It is to no purpose. They come back without him. It is easy to understand what he cries. At first, he only called for help. The second night, he must have had some delirium. He talked with his wife and his children. We often detected the name Elise. Today, he rarely weeps. By evening, the voice dwindles to a croaking, but it persists still through the whole night. We hear it so distinctly because the wind blows toward our line. In the morning, when we suppose he must already have long gone to rest, there comes across to us one last gurgling rattle. The days are hot, and the dead lie unburied. We cannot fetch them all in. If we did, we should not know what to do with them. The shells will bury them. Many have their bellies swollen up like balloons. They hiss, belch, and make movements. The gases in them make noises. The sky is blue and without clouds. In the evening it grows sultry, and the heat rises from the earth. When the wind blows toward us, it brings the smell of blood, which is very heavy and sweet. This deadly exhalation from the shell holes seems to be a mixture of chloroform and putrefaction and fills us with nausea and retching. The night becomes quiet, and the hunt for copper driving bands and the silken parachutes of the French star shells begins. Why the driving bands are so desirable, no one knows exactly. The collectors merely assert that they are valuable. Some have collected so many that they will stoop under the weight of them when we go back. But he at least gives a reason. He intends to give them to his girls to supplement their garters. At this, the Frisians explode with mirth. They slap their knees. By Jove, though, he's a wit. He is. He's got brains. Theoden especially can hardly contain himself. He takes the largest of the rings in his hand, and every now and then puts his leg through it to show how much slack there is. Hey, man, she must have legs like legs. His thoughts mount somewhat higher, and a behind, too, she must have, like an elephant. He can knock it over it. I wish I could play hot hand with her once, my hat. He beams, proud that his girl should receive so much appreciation. She's a nice bit, he says with self-satisfaction. The parachutes are turned to more practical uses. According to the size of the bust, 3 or perhaps 4 will make a blouse. Crop and I use them as handkerchiefs. The others send them home. If the woman could see at what risk these bits of rag are often obtained, they would be horrified. So now these parachutes, when they fall, the men think that the silk that they use to make the parachutes is valuable, so they want to take it and use it for other uses. Either for the girls, like Katie, or for their woman back home. Cat surprises Theoden, endeavoring with the perfect equanimity to knock the driving band off a dud. If anyone else had tried it, the thing would have exploded, but Theoden has always had luck with him. One morning, 2 butterflies fly in front of our trench. They are brimstone butterflies with red spots on their yellow wings. What can they be looking for here? There is not a plant nor a flower for miles. They settle in the teeth of his skull. The birds, too, are just as carefree. They have long since accustomed themselves to the war. Every morning, larks ascend from no man's land. A year ago, we watched them nesting. The young ones grew up, too. We have a spell from the rats in the trench. They are in no man's land. We know what for. They grow fat. When we see one, we have a crack at it. At night, we hear again them rolling behind the enemy lines. All day, we have only the normal shelling, so that we are able to repair the trenches. There is always plenty of amusement. The airmen see to that. There are countless fights for us to watch every day. Battle planes don't trouble us, but the observation planes we hate like the plague. They put the artillery to us. A few minutes after they appear, shrapnel and high explosives begin to drop on us. We lose 11 men in one day that way, and 5 of them stretcher bearers. 2 are smashed so that Theoden remarks he could scrape them off the wall of the trench with a spoon and bury them in a mess tin. Another has the lower part of his body and his legs torn off. Dead, his chest leans against the side of a trench. His face is lemon yellow, and his beard still burns a cigarette. It glows until it dies out on his lips. We put the dead in a large shell hole. So far there are 3 layers, one on top of the other. Suddenly the shelling begins to pound again. Soon we are sitting up once more with the rigid tenseness of blank anticipation. Attack, counterattack, charge, repulse. These are the words for what things they signify. We have lost a good many men, mostly recruits. Reinforcements have again been sent up to our sector. They are one of the new regiments, composed almost entirely of young fellows just called up. They have had hardly any training, and are set up in the field with only theoretical knowledge. They do not know what a hand grenade is. They do know what a hand grenade is, it is true. But they have very little idea of cover, and what is the most important of all, have no eye for it. A fold in the ground has to be quite 18 inches high before they can see it. Although we need reinforcement, the recruits give us almost more trouble than they are worth. They are helpless in this grim fighting area. They fall like flies. Modern trench warfare demands knowledge and experience. A man must have a feeling for the contours of the ground, an ear for the sound and character of the shells, must be able to decide beforehand where they will drop, how they will burst, and how to shelter from them. The young recruits, of course, know none of these things. They get killed simply because they hardly can tell shrapnel from high explosive. They are mowed down because they are listening anxiously to the roar of the big coal boxes falling in the rear, amidst the light piping whistle of the low-spreading daisy cutters. They flock together like sheep instead of scattering. Even the wounded are shot down like hares by airmen. Their pale turnip faces, their pitiful clenched hands, the fine courage of these poor devils, the desperate charges and attacks made by the poor brave wretches who are so terrified that they dare not cry out loudly, but with battered chests, with torn bellies, arms and legs, only whimper softly for their mothers and cease as soon as one looks at them. Their sharp, downy, dead faces have the awful expressionlessness of dead children. It brings a lump into the throat to see how they go over and run and fall. A man would like to spank them, they are so stupid, to take them by the arm and lead them away from here where they have no business to be. They wear gray coats and trousers and boots, but for most of them the uniform is far too big. It hangs on their limbs, their shoulders are too narrow, their bodies too slight. No uniform was ever made to these childish measurements. Between 5 and 10 recruits follow to every old hand. A surprise gas attack carries off a lot of them. They have not yet learned what to do. We found one dugout full of them, with blue heads and black lips. Some of them in the shell hole took off their masks too soon. They did not know that the gas lies longest in the hollows. When they saw others on top without masks, they pulled theirs off too and swallowed enough to scorch their lungs. Their condition is hopeless. They choke to death with hemorrhages and suffocation. These poor kids that are getting drafted from the German front have no idea what they're in for. They haven't had really great training. I mean, you can only have so much training, and then the reality is completely different, right? And Paul sees all this, and he's just like, these poor kids, like, they don't know anything. They die literally by handfuls, but the Germans are just setting them up because they need numbers. So they're going to recruit everyone they can, and they're just like, if you die, you die. Sorry, but we need numbers. In one part of the trench, I suddenly run into Himmelstas. We dive into the same dugout. Breathless, we are all lying one beside the other, waiting for the charge. Now, Himmelstas has been sent to the front. He's literally fighting in the trenches. He's not done this before. When we run out again, although I'm very excited, I suddenly think, where's Himmelstas? Quickly, I jump back into the dugout and find him with a small scratch lying in a corner, pretending to be wounded. His face looks sullen. He's in a panic. He is new to it, too. But it makes me mad that the young recruit should be out there and he here. Get out, I spit. He does not stir. His lips quiver. His mustache twitches. Out, I repeat. He draws up his legs, crouches back against the wall, and shows his teeth like a cur. I seize him by the arm and try to pull him up. He barks. This is too much for me. I grab him by the neck and shake him like a sack. His head jerks from side to side. You lump. Will you get out, you hound, you skunk. Sneak out of it, would you? His eyes become glassy. I knock his head against the wall. You cow. I kick him in the ribs. You swine. I push him to the door and shove him out, head first. Another wave of our attack has just come up. The lieutenant is with them. He sees us and yells, forward, forward, join in, follow. And the word of command does what all my banging cannot. Himmelstas hears the order, looks round him as if awakened, and follows on. I come after and watch him go over. Once more, he's a smart Himmelstas to the parade ground, has even outstripped the lieutenant and is far ahead. Bombardment, barrage, current fire, mines, gas, tanks, machine guns, hand grenades, words, but they hold the horror of the world. Our faces are encrusted, our thoughts are devastated, we are weary to death. When the attack comes, we shall have to strike many of the men with our fists to wake them and make them come with us. Our eyes are burnt, our hands are torn, our knees bleed, our elbows are raw. How long has it been? Weeks, months, years? Oh God, only days. We see time pass in the colorless faces of the dying. We cram food into us. We run, we throw, we shoot, we kill, we lie about. We are feeble and spent, and nothing supports us but the knowledge that there are still feebler, still more spent, still more helpless ones there who, with staring eyes, look upon us as gods who have escaped death many times. In the few hours of rest, we teach them. There, see that waggle top? That's a motor coming. Keep down and we'll go clean over. But if it comes this way, then run for it. You can run for the motor. We sharpen our ears to the malicious, hardly audible buzz of the smaller shells that are not easily distinguishable. We must pick them out from the general din by their insect-like hum. We explain to them that these are far more dangerous than the big ones that can be heard along beforehand. We show them how to take cover from the aircraft, how to simulate a dead man when one is overrun in an attack, how to time hand grenades so that they explode half a second before hitting the ground. We teach them to fling themselves into the holes as quick as lightning before the shells with instantaneous fuses. We show them how to clean up a trench with a handful of bombs. We explain the difference between the fuse length of the enemy bombs and our own. We put them wise to the sound of gas shells, show them all the tricks that can save them from death. They listen, they are docile. When it begins again in their excitement, they do everything wrong. He Westis drags off a great wound in his back through which the lung pulses at every breath. I can only press his hand. It's all up, Paul, he groans, and he bites his arm because of the pain. We see men living with their skulls blown open. We see soldiers run with their 2 feet cut off. They stagger on their splintered stumps into the next shell hole. A lance corporal crawls 1.5 miles on his hands, dragging his smashed knee after him. Another goes to the dressing station, and over his clasped hands bulge his intestines. We see men without mouths, without jaws, without faces. We find one man who has held the artery of his arm in his teeth for 2 hours in order not to bleed to death. The sun goes down, night comes, the shells whine, life is at an end. Still, the little piece of convulsed earth on which we lie is held. We have yielded no more than 100 yards of it as a prize to the enemy. but on every yard there lies a dead man. We've just been relieved, so that means now they were at the trenches for so many days, now they're going to go back to their base camp. The wheels roll beneath us, we stand dully, and when they call mind wire comes, we bend our knees. It was summer when we came up, so came up to the front. The trees were still green, now it is autumn and the night is gray and wet. But lower we stop, we climb out, a confused heap, a remnant of many names. On either side stand people, dark, calling out the numbers of the brigades, the battalions, and at each call a little group separates itself off, a small handful of dirty, pallid soldiers, a dreadfully small handful, and a dreadfully small remnant. Now someone is calling the number of our company. It is, yes, the company commander. He has come through then. His arm is in a sling. We go over to him. I recognize Captain Albert. We stand together, lean against each other, and look at one another. And we hear the number of our company called again and again. He will call a long time. I did not hear him in the hospitals and shell holes. Once again, second company this way, and then more softly, nobody else. Second company. He is silent, then huskily he says, "Is that all?" He gives the order. Number. The morning is gray. It was still summer when we came up. We were 150 strong. Now we freeze. It is autumn. The leaves rustle. The voices flutter out wearily. 1, 2, 3, 4, and cease at 32. There's a long silence before the voice asks, "Anyone else?" and waits, and then says softly, "In squads," and then breaks off and is only able to finish, "Second company," with difficulty. Second company, march easy. A short line trudges off into the morning. 32 men. Okay, so chapter 6 is really right when they go up to the front. We get kind of that first-hand experience of what it's like to fight at the front, and what the cost of war is on these boys, both mentally and physically. Okay, end of chapter 6.